Hey everybody, Jane here, and today I'm doing my February reading wrap-up. In February, I read 12 books and I DNF'd one book. Of those books, 5 were audiobooks, 5 were from my library, and 3 were from my owned TBR. Of those 3, 2 I'd won from either Goodreads giveaways or library thing giveaways, and 1 was a book that was just sitting on my shelf. The first book was my DNF, and it was called Usual Cruelty. This book is the author's thoughts and opinions about the criminal justice system, and I ended up DNFing it because I didn't jive with the author's voice. I also felt like the author, in many cases, was kind of minimizing what people are typically going to jail for. He made it seem like everybody in jail is there for unpaid parking tickets and smoking a little pot, and that's just not, in my opinion, a reality. I'm sure that there are people there for petty things, but there are also real criminals, and you can tell from the author's tone of voice that he's very opposed to prison for almost anything, and maybe anything. He calls it putting people in cages. And while he did have some good points about how law and punishment affects people differently based on class and race and wealth, I felt like a lot of this book just it was hard for me to agree with, and I felt like the author was making their point in a slightly dishonest way. Like I said, making it seem like everybody in jail is there for smoking pot, whereas at least around here, that's not so much the case. Maybe other places, I don't know. I do think that prison reform is something that needs to happen. I'm not sure what that exactly means or how we should be reforming. I agree that prison is not a great system, and opportunities for prisoners with better education and job skills and help once they get out would help us to not have people being arrested again and again and part of the system. And that's kind of what I thought this book was going to be, but I don't think that's what it was. I didn't get very far, only about 60 pages, before I decided I just couldn't take anymore. The next book, that was from a Goodreads giveaway. This one was from a Library Things giveaway, and I am going to be doing I did a full review on it, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. This is Stacey in the Hands of an Angry God. I gave it a 3 out of 5. It is an interesting book set in a religious dystopian. We have Stacey, who is a woman who recently has found out she is pregnant, and the laws are kind of closing in on women. She is now not going to be able to graduate from college because of her pregnancy. There's a possibility her child is going to be taken away from her because when she was a teenager, she used drugs. Not during the pregnancy, she cleaned herself up and has been going to law school. So she decides to get involved in politics to try to basically reclaim rights for women against this very oppressive regime. And it doesn't go great. I loved the world building in this. I didn't connect well with Stacey, and the plot I really loved until about the halfway point of the book, and then I felt it got a little off the rails sometimes. So I really loved the first half of this book, and it was probably a 4 out of 5 for the vast majority of the first part of it. And then things just kind of got wonky in the second part, and I didn't like it as much. But I do have a full review if you want my full thoughts. It was a good book, and I think if you enjoy books like The Handmaid's Tale, you might enjoy at least the world building of this. But there were some problems outside of the world building that I just couldn't give it higher than a 3. The last book from my owned TBR was His Expectant Ex. This one I bought a while ago from a library sale, and it's been on my shelves. It is about Sebastian and Mariana. Sebastian and Mariana have been married for about 10 years. They got married when they were 19, and they've had it rough. They've had a lot of problems with infertility, and dealing with those has not always been something they've done well together. As they are getting divorced, they decide to have a one-night stand, and she ends up pregnant. And of course, because this has been such a huge issue in their marriage, he vows that they need to get things fixed and get back together, because there's no way, after everything they've been through, that he is having a pregnant woman and not being married to her. Overall, this book was okay. I loved the things they were dealing with their infertility. I thought the problems they were having as a couple and not communicating well and not dealing with that infertility together was really honest and beautiful, and I did like that. Some of the things that didn't work so well is this couple is very lusty for each other, and while the sex wasn't explicit, I just felt like they spent more time lusting than loving each other, especially people who are supposed to be, have been together for 10 years. Another small thing I want to point out is for them getting married at 19, they did really well for themselves. He's a lawyer and she is an interior designer. And just, I know these books aren't supposed to be reality, but it's really hard to get there. That's a lot of struggle to get a life like that when you get married at 19. And I would have liked to see more about their early struggles and getting where they are. Now, his family's pretty wealthy, so they probably helped. But yeah, I just didn't feel like it was a really realistic portrayal of people who've been, married at 19 and the struggles of growing up and growing into your marriage. And, these people are just two high-powered, well-off people who are doing well in their life. And it's like, you got married at 19 and you had to go to college while married and support yourself while married and doing all this stuff. And that's got to be tough. And I would have liked to see a little more about that. So those were my owned TBR. Next, I'm going to go through the library books. The first one I have for you is The Marriage Clock. It is about a girl named Leela who has an agreement with her parents that if she can't find a husband in 3 months, she will allow them to set her up in an arranged marriage. I am going to be doing a full review on this one. I did give it a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed the majority of the story. Leela is a Muslim American, and seeing representation of their culture was really interesting. Seeing the family dynamics was really interesting. Definitely reading about somebody who's different from myself. It's mostly comedy. She goes on a lot of bad dates. And I think I was expecting this to be a little bit more of a romance, and it's not at all romance. It's closer probably to chick lit, which I enjoy chick lit, but I was expecting, I think, a lot more romance instead of, it's very comedic bad dates mostly. The one thing I will say about this book that kind of let me down is I didn't love the end. I think most people will love the end. I personally didn't. So that was definitely a little bit of a sad for me. As I was getting to the end, I was like, are we, okay. Yeah, so the end didn't really work for me, but I think it will work for most people. I think I'm just a weird exception. I just felt like the end maybe in some ways invalidated the rest of the book. But overall, still a fun read. I did enjoy most of my time with this book. The next book was Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? This is a book by Caitlin Doughty, and it is about children asking questions about death. And I read a good portion of this with my kids, but some of it I did read off on my own. I will say it's not as interesting as some of her other books because her other books hold a little bit more of a common thread, and this one is literally question, answer, question, answer. But there's some really cool questions. Some of them being an adult I already knew, but this is a book meant for children about death and the process of dying. So I thought it was good for what it was, and I did give it a 4 out of 5. The next book I read was a graphic novel, and it was Agatha, The Real Life of Agatha Christie. And this is a graphic novel that kind of biographies Agatha Christie's life. I gave it a 3 out of 5. I felt like it was kind of confusing, especially because I'd never read a biography on Agatha Christie, so there was a lot of stuff I didn't know, and just following what was going on was kind of tricky. One thing that was cool was throughout it, she does talk to her characters. So we have, visits by Poirot, Miss Marple, Tommy and Tuppence, I think is what the couple are called. So we do have characters that show up, and that was kind of cool. But like I said, I found it a little bit hard to follow because of just not knowing much about her biography and just the way that we're fed it through this graphic novel. It's not very long, and I think maybe that's part of the problem. All right, the next two books were on my 5-star predictions, so I am going to give you my star rating in case you're not interested in the 5-star prediction video, you don't care, whatever. So if you want to wait and see my 5-star prediction video to find out if these got 5 stars, I will put a timestamp below to where you can jump to in this video so as not to be spoiled for that. But the first book is The Color of Magic. This is a book that I, again, did a full review on. I will be releasing the full review probably after I do my 5-star prediction wrap-up. It is about a wizard and a traveler who have an adventure in this world called Discworld. I thought I would love it because Terry Pratchett wrote Good Omens with Neil Gaiman, and I loved Good Omens. Good Omens was one of my favorite books. And while I really did enjoy the humor in this book, I had a hard time following what was going on, and I got bored pretty easy. So it ended up being just a 3 out of 5 for me. The next one I have that was also on my 5-star predictions was The Patron Saint of Lost Dogs. This is about a man named Cyrus who inherits his father's veterinary clinic, and he is not really interested in running it. He is a veterinary pathologist, so he does have a degree in veterinary medicine, but he hasn't really taken care of patients in a really long time. He really just wants to get this clinic up and going so he can sell it and move back home because he's having some financial problems and legal problems at home. However, he falls in love with the animals and the job and the place. It's cute, it's heartwarming. My biggest issue was I didn't really connect with Cyrus. He's very judgy. I will have a full review about this, but it ended up being a 4 out of 5. It was a feel-good book. I did enjoy it. I love Nick Trout's writing. I love the animals and the veterinary practice, but Cyrus just wasn't quite who I wanted him to be. He was a very judgy person, and I didn't like that. All right, so the rest of these are all audiobooks. The first audiobook I read this month was The Mystery on the Blue Train by Agatha Christie. Poirot is on this train and there is a murder on the train and he has to figure out what happened. This was a 3 out of 5 for me. It was okay. I did like it better I absolutely loved it better than The Big Four, which has so far been my least favorite Agatha Christie mystery. Although I will say that Poirot took a really long time to get into the mystery, and we are kind of bombarded with side characters first. So this wasn't a great read. It was okay. I was only kind of interested, but it wasn't as awful as The Big Four. So we'll take what we can get. The second book I read was Pride and Prejudice. And I will be doing a full review on that. I gave that a 4 out of 5. Basically, it was my first time reading the classic Pride and Prejudice through. I really enjoyed it overall. It was very funny. I am glad I listened to it on audiobook though, because I definitely don't think I would have enjoyed it as much reading it off the page. I had some unpopular opinions about side characters who get a bit of a bad rap, but overall, it was just fun, and I understand why people love it. Movie-wise, I've always liked Sense and Sensibility better, so I kind of want to read Sense and Sensibility and see if I like that better than Pride and Prejudice, because movie-wise, I definitely do. There were things I didn't like about Pride and Prejudice, but I think there are things you're not supposed to like Darcy and his horrendous proposal. The next book I read was The Fitzgerald Ruse, which is book 2 in the Sam Blackman series. The Fitzgerald Ruse has Sam Blackman and his girlfriend, they've opened a detective agency, and they get a call from one of the nursing home residents that they'd worked with on the previous book, who says that there's a resident at the nursing home who wants to hire them. She has a safe deposit box that she wants them to fetch that has something to do with Scott Fitzgerald, the author of The Great Gatsby. Murders start happening, craziness ensues, the box is stolen, and Sam and his partner have to figure out what was going on. I gave this a 3 out of 5. I liked the first book a little bit better. Sam and his girlfriend, I think her name's Michaela, I found their dynamic a little bit annoying in this book. He was a little bit overprotective of her and more like, you can't go out and do this and that. And he wasn't really that way in the first book. So I didn't love that change in his character. And I'm not sure that it really fit well with what we were doing with characters from the first book. The mystery also just wasn't as interesting to me personally as the first book's mystery was. So it was okay. I didn't love it. And I'm sorry for a little bit of the background noise. As you know, I record at the library and apparently there are neighbors coming in. The next book was another Hercule Poirot, and it was called Black Coffee. Now this is actually, I think it was written originally by Agatha Christie as a play, and the version I read was like a version that was made into a story, a book story. I did really surprisingly enjoy this one. I gave it a 4 out of 5, and I would say it is right under The Murder of Roger Ackroyd as being my favorite of the Poirot books. Basically, there is a gentleman who has secret plans for military stuff, and he believes somebody in the family is trying to steal it. And he calls Poirot in to help with this, and then is murdered. So Poirot gets there, this person has been murdered, and he has to figure out who the murderer is and what happened to these weapon plans. It is all the things I love about the Hercule Poirot mysteries, and I think some of the elements were things that were done in other books that I didn't like a little bit of a this person isn't who you think they are thing. But the way it was done in this particular version, I liked much better than, for instance, Murder on the Links, which I didn't think that was done nearly as well. So yeah, this one was really good. The last book I read this month was the third book in the Wayward Children series, Beneath the Sugar Sky. I am going to be doing a video on that as well and doing a full interview, or a full review video on that. However, basically, I really enjoyed it. It was a 4 out of 5. I think I even liked it better than the first book in the series. So in this one, one of the characters who was killed in book 1, they have a child in their portal world, and their portal world doesn't always follow timelines real sensibly. So their child comes back because their child is basically disappearing because their mother was murdered and wasn't supposed to be murdered. So they are trying to revive the person who was murdered, and they have to go into some crazy portal worlds to do it. It did have Christopher and Cade, which are my 2 favorite characters from the series, and I just really had a good time with this one. So yeah, it was a good overall reading month. Most of the books I read were continuations in series, because I had the Poirots, the Fitzgerald Ruse, and Beneath the Sugar Sky, so quite a bit of continuations of stuff. A couple new books, a couple, 5-star predictions, a really good variety, actually. I'm really pleased with my February reading month. March is going to be mostly middle grade, so it'll be interesting to see how that month goes for me. But yeah, this is Jane. If you enjoyed this, please hit like. If you have any comments about any of the books I read, feel free to leave those comments below. I also like to remind people that I am an author. There are going to be links not just to my social media, but also to my places to buy my books below if you would like to check my books out. My books are in Kindle Unlimited. They're also on Overdrive. A lot of times libraries are connected to the Overdrive system, so you may be able to read my books through your library. I also have several books on Audible. So if you have an Audible subscription, or if you have the Audible romance package, several of my books are in there too, and you can read all of them for free that way, or as I said, through Kindle Unlimited. You can also purchase ebook copies or paperback copies most places that books are sold. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kobo, just kind of all over the map. So this has been Jane. I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.